having people over. It'll be smaller, so we won't, and no garden. So we don't have anything like that. But that's okay. It's okay.
Well, people can straggle in. I think it's time we should get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to 440
Kathy.
Gallery. This is the Artist Talk for Patterns, the theme show that we have up, which is a group show of 28 artists. Is that right, Susan?
28.
My name is Karen Gibbons. I'm one of the members of 440 Gallery, an artist-run gallery here on 6th Avenue near 9th Street in Park Slope, Brooklyn. And we're thrilled to welcome 5 artists from the show. It would be fabulous if we could have had all of the artists, but we're excited tonight to have Katina Bitsikas, Ian Ha, Kenneth Murphy, Kay Sarantonio, and Jean Marie Wasilik with us tonight. And really excited to have Sarah Brook, the curator of Patterns, here with us. And I'm going to be asking Sarah a few questions, and then Sarah's going to ask the artists some questions. And if you audience members have questions, please type them into the chat or save them for the end, and you can unmute and ask personally if you'd like. But after we ask all our questions, then we'll look at all the questions in the chat that might have come up during the talk. So Susan Greenstein is our another gallery member, and she's going to be operating the PowerPoint. So let's share the screen now and see the installation shots of this show.
Okay, one moment.
So it's great to see the installation shots to get an idea of scale and how it looks. And I really encourage anybody who is in the area to come and see the show, because it's definitely different to see things in real life than it is to see it on the digital screen. But that said, this will give you a little idea of what the show is like here at our gallery. So I want to also mention that all the pieces are for sale. So if you see something you like and you want to inquire more about it, you can contact Amy Williams on the weekends. She's here at the gallery, or you can just email the gallery and Amy will get back to you. You can also look at the show on Artsy, I believe, and we'll put that in the chat at some point, so that if you wanted to see more about the work and get to look at it at your leisure, you can go to the Artsy show. And that link will also be on the 440 Gallery website. So this show is up in the gallery through July 31st. Really a wonderful show, I must say. So I'm going to start asking questions of Sarah Brook, but we're going to see the individual pieces in the show and with the artist name below, so you get an idea of the selections that Sarah's made. Sarah, congratulations on curating a beautiful show. I'd like to preface my first question by first explaining the process that we go through as a gallery to put together our juried shows. So every year we have a theme show, and we also have the small works show. So the small works, the theme is the size, but we choose a theme for the theme show. And this year people suggested different themes, and then we vote on it as the gallery members, and the winning theme was patterns. So then we choose a curator, and the curator usually has some connection to the gallery or some member of the gallery, or is just someone that we really respect their point of view in the art world, and admire their voice. And that's definitely describes Sarah, who's been a friend of the gallery for a while and has an amazing body of work herself. And when Amy, our director, announced that Sarah Brooke was the chosen curator, I was delighted and a little bit surprised and intrigued that Sarah would be choosing patterns, since I don't really think of her as a pattern artist. And so she did not choose the theme, but she definitely rose to the occasion. And I knew that she would have an interesting curatorial perspective on this theme of patterns. So Sarah, how would you describe that perspective?
Thanks, Karen. Hi to everyone. And I just want to say that it's been amazing to curate this show. It was really, really, really a pleasure, and really fun and really satisfying. And for those artists who I've met in person, like the conversations we've been able to have about your work have just further enriched the experience. It's just been awesome. And I'm super grateful to the 5 artists who could be here tonight, and also to all of you who have showed up. So thank you so much. And I'm excited about our conversation. And yeah, the patterns theme. I think one of the things that's exciting to me about the idea of patterns is that it really, like I think there's sort of a go-to that we think of as like a visual, kind of like a tight visual repetition. But there's so many other ways to think about what pattern means, like patterns of behavior or larger patterns in each of our practices, like the things that keep showing up, the questions that we keep asking, the things that we keep exploring, patterns of movement, patterns of intention, patterns of desire, patterns of thought, all of these things fit within the theme to me. And so that made it really exciting to be able to look at how visual pattern, or what we think of kind of when we first think of pattern, could be in conversation with some of these other experiences or ideas of pattern. And so that was really how I went about selecting the works for the show. It was works that seemed to be in conversation with both or many of the interpretations of what pattern could mean.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really fascinating. And I noticed that there's a variety of media. There's sculpture, painting, photography, printmaking, videos. So was this a deliberate decision to have a diversity of media?
For sure. Yeah, I think it just expands the options of how people can talk about what a pattern might mean. And I was really excited by all of the different submissions that we have, and then different kinds of submissions. And I wanted a show that offered as many access points to folks as possible to the theme of the work. And I guess that relates to my own practice somewhat. You know, I use text sometimes, I use painting, I use installation and sculpture, and I want to offer, as I said, multiple points of access to viewers. Like I want somebody to find something that they connect with that can then bring them into the rest of the show or the rest of the work. And I just thought it was fascinating and very cool like all of the different ways people interpreted pattern. I wanted to showcase as much of that as possible.
Cool, thank you. So you chose to take an active role in hanging the show. Can you speak about how that piece contributes to the curation?
Yes. So one of the ways that I work is in installation art. And in that practice, I bring in components that I have made myself, and I also bring in what I would call found objects or found work. And the process of installation involves having a conversation between whatever space I'm in and all of these components that I've brought, and just kind of playing and moving them around until I feel like there's a coherent conversation in the room. And to me, selecting all these works for this show was step one, and having that conversation with all of them together in the space was step two. And I think it wouldn't have felt complete to me as a process that I was engaged in without that. And that was really satisfying too, and fun to see the conversation that they all had, that I had sort of started in my head when I was looking at the pieces and thinking about how some of them could work together. Then to get to actualize that in physical space was really satisfying. And I was grateful to be able to do it, and grateful that you all were happy to have me come, because I think it would have been really a different experience to not have that connection with the work and with like the body of work in the show together.
Well, I think it shows if you come to the gallery and see the relationships that have been made with how it's hung, that you'll see what Sarah's talking about. So finally, Sarah, what was most challenging about the curatorial process for you?
Well, first of all, there was, I think curators always say this, but there's a lot of really great work, and that was just true. So trying to figure out what to not include was hard. But I think also like trying to balance selecting the pieces that I really loved and really connected with creating a show that made sense, and also a show that could fit in the space. And where the sizes of things matched, and the overall theme, there was an overall conversation. And obviously I didn't want to create a show where everything was similar, but I also didn't want a show that was disjointed in an uncomfortable way. So trying to balance, I love this and I love this and I love this, but with like, okay, let's make something that that actually has a coherent kind of comprehensive statement in and of itself.
Yeah, that's a fine line to walk, and it's handled beautifully, I think.
Thank you. I also think that if the work also speaks for itself, right? Like if an artist has really worked at and kind of refined a language, I think that can speak to another work by an artist who has really refined their language. And that felt present too.
So that's a great segue to beginning to speak with the artists that are here tonight.
Okay.
Indeed. And we're going to start with Katina Bitsikas.
Yeah, and I will just say that I asked each artist to speak a bit on two things. How do they understand the concept of pattern operating in the piece in the show and in their practice in general? And also what feels most crucial for folks to understand about their work? Like, what do they not want to walk away tonight without saying about what their work means to them or to the world or in the show or whatever? So we'll have each of the artists speak a bit about their work in that context. And yes, Katina's is first with a video piece. And are we able to play the video?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I just want to keep it on. I'm sorry. I'm just going to keep it on.
Thanks.
I was just gonna go all the way to the end so we can have a visual of it.
That's great. Thank
All
you.
right. I think there was some honking mixed in there with the audio a little bit on the background. Yeah, so thank you so much again for having me and for allowing me to share a little bit about this piece. So to answer some of Sarah's questions, so this piece is called Patchwork, and it's a video quilt that was actually created from photos of the scars and bruises of a woman named Lucy Cook, who's 33 years old, and she has survived 3 heart transplants. And so these images were like collected over time from past surgical operations. And so I wanted to utilize this form of a quilt, which also historically is an object created with care and then also given for comfort. And so I use patterns in this work to show both the passage of time and also this repetitive process of these multiple invasive procedures that she's had throughout time. Also, if you could hear, there's a pattern in the audio too through repetition, but the viewer is expecting this kind of like consistent heartbeat sound, but then the heartbeat kind of stutters, right? And then it kind of stops. So it changes kind of the expectation of what the viewer expects to hear with a traditional paced heartbeat. And so kind of in my body work as a whole, patterns are also visible. I reference patterns within the human body a lot in my work, such as like cellular structures, but also within architectural plans as well. And so I think to answer the second question about what I hope the viewer would take from this work, so my goal with this work, as well as this whole body of work that I've made in partnership with Lucy, is that for the viewer to have a sort of like little sneak peek into some of her journey that she's gone through, and also the trauma that she's overcome. So like I said, this video is only a portion of her whole story, and different parts of her story are shown throughout the body work, throughout the different pieces that I've made. But I also hope that both this video, but also the process of creating work and for me to tell Lucy's story is helps her to reclaim some of these traumatic experiences that she's had. I also want the viewer to see beauty like within the body in all of its forms, scars and all, no matter how abject that may be. And also I just want to say, for me, it's a unique opportunity to use a traditional medium, craft medium, right, like quilt making, and then apply it in this sort of digital pattern-like form. I think that's all I have.
Great. Thank you so much, Katina.
Yeah.
And I just watching the video again reminded me of seeing it for the first time. And I wanted to share, I mean, with you and with everybody here, that I had such an intense response to your work. Like I first saw it and I was like, right? Of course. I was like, what is this? This is really disturbing. And then I kept coming back to it. I was like, this is pulling me in. Like, this is really the pattern, the sound, the like, what is this? The making something beautiful out of something that seems kind of upsetting and traumatic, like really visually, aesthetically, conceptually, like it really pulled me in. And I think that's amazing when somebody can create a work like that. And that was when I was like, this has to be in the show, because I'm having like 45 feelings about it. Like, it's really powerful. I'm really grateful for the inclusion of the work. And I also, like, speaking of this idea of different types of pattern, I saw that you also work with bereaved folks who've just lost someone on, it looks like making some kind of art to describe or to help process or to help heal like that experience of loss. And that led me to think about like patterns of loss and patterns of healing. And I wondered if you had anything you wanted to share about that.
Oh man, so much I can share about that. Yeah, so no, you're right. The other sort of side of what I do is myself and my partners actually in the School of Medicine here at Mizzou. We have these workshops that we give to folks who are recently bereaved. And they are able to help sort of piece together and also reclaim some of their narrative around loss, right? And so there's definitely is a pattern with that, right? Because the life is so cyclical, right, in nature. And so I think that, you know, we all sort of go through these different points in time in our life. And I think that is really important to not just, especially when it comes to death or trauma, right? Not just sweep it under the rug, because you know that there's somebody else who's gone through something really similar to you, right? And I feel like I hope to connect with the viewer sort of on that level, to speak to those people who maybe have had similar experiences as well, because you're right, there is such a pattern within this, and even if we don't all talk about it, we all sort of experienced or will experience these same sorts of things.
Thank you.
And thank you for your kind words too. I appreciate it.
Okay, I think Ian is up next. Is that right? Yes. And yeah, Ian's piece is, to me, it's just absolutely gorgeous. And like the subtlety and the contrast and the clarity and the mystery and the precision, and it really spoke to me. And then I met Ian at the opening, and we talked about how these are, Ian, I believe they're women artists or women creatives who are no longer living workspaces. Is that right?
Yeah, so I was thinking about your question about patterns a lot, and because I think my work is very surfacely about patterns. I'm an architect, like I think in patterns, I make patterns, so I'm always very conscious of that. But I was thinking about the pattern of behavior, the pattern of thought, and this whole series it's a series that I'm developing, and it's based on women artists born between 1850 and 1900 who were working at the same time as Picasso and Matisse and all of these male geniuses, and we don't know any of their names, we don't know any of their work. And so I started making these series of drawings based on the spaces that they inhabited, because I was thinking about a little bit about the sorrow of them, that they were so active, and they must have had these really full lives, right? Working in the art world, especially in Paris, and we don't know them at all. And so part of this whole project to me is breaking that narrative and breaking the pattern of what we considered genius and what we considered great works of art at the time period. So like this particular one is based on Chana Orloff, who was a sculptor working in Paris at the time. But there were a lot, I mean, it's just, and I read recently that like Sophie Tober Arp, who was married to Jean Arp, is having a retrospective at the MoMA. And she was also one of those women who was insane. She was an architect. She designed their house. She made all of this work. And, and she never figures into any of our dialogues. And so when I think about breaking patterns or patterns in general, that's what I'm thinking of. Like, this is a pattern of thought that we've had about artists. And I hope that we can change that pattern.
Right. Also like a sociocultural pattern more generally.
Yeah, very much, very much. Every time you ask somebody, a great artist from that time period, women never come there. It's never the first answer, or even the fifth answer. It's almost no answer. So yeah, definitely.
I really appreciated that lens. And I'm also curious what it is about those women's spaces that you like.
To me, there is something really kind of sad about, I mean, not sad, but maybe because I think about the spaces that I work in and how I work in between spaces. I don't have time to go sit in my studio all day. So I work like in little snatched moments, right? And I'm thinking about some of these women didn't have their own studios, or if they did, they were in their homes. So I think a lot about the spaces that they inhabited and how they were able to create and make work in those spaces. And then of course I'm an architect, so I'm always fascinated by space.
Yeah, I love that. So the space is kind of like it's sad, and it's I don't know if reclamation is quite the right word, maybe declaration.
Yeah.
Who they were, but who they weren't maybe recognized to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's to me, I don't know, I guess also I think being an artist is not just the work that I'm producing, but the whole the body of who we are and what encompasses our practices. And to me, space is really an important part of that.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's in the show. Okay, Kenneth, I think you're up.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Happy you're here. So Kenneth's piece was one of those. I was just like, oh my God, it's an eyeball coming out of a tree. We have to have this. That's amazing.
Thank you.
I'm so glad it's in the show. I mean, I loved the visual pattern of the bark and also like the textural pattern of the oil or acrylic. It's acrylic. It's oil.
It's like oil. Yeah.
Textural pattern of the all of the media that you're using. And there's like such a satisfying rhythm to that. And then there's this eyeball. Just like, so I would love to hear more about it. Can you share more about the piece?
Sure. And thank you for including me. And thank you for having me participate tonight. I'm very excited about it. So when it comes to pattern in this painting, I definitely, as a painter, often like to take patterns from real life and emulate them or represent them, of course. And I find that I really like challenging patterns, and I really like seeing people respond to technique or what I call legibility. So if I can take something from our world and then make it something surreal or still remain within the form that it is, but take on another form, that's definitely what I want to do. So when I saw the pattern was the theme, I was like, yes, okay, hopefully I'm gonna, find a way in this theme show. I'm really glad that I did. With this painting, I thought not only about patterns on the surface, but I thought about social patterns and patterns of interactivity between people. The title of this painting is actually Why Are the Neighbors Staring at Us Like That? This is the title of one of them that I had submitted in connection with the other ones. And what I wanted to do with this one, and that the term why are the neighbors staring at us like that, is from my own experience as a gay man and having it be known when I became a teen and walking around my neighborhood and being like, are they staring at me because this is what is now known in my social circle? That was a thing for me. And when composing this painting, that's what I wanted to do. And not only think about the experiences I've had in this multicultural society that we're all participating within, having strange adverse reactions from people I don't know in my community, but many people here have because of the cultures that it's somebody moves. And when I thought about who may respond to this, I thought about I'm seeing my own context in this painting, but what if somebody saw this and had thought, when I moved into my neighborhood that I'm presently in, I had an adverse experience too, where I couldn't tell if the way that I was looking at. So I really wanted people to be able to come to this painting, the composite that it is of portrait and still life, basically, or even landscape, but be able to find some of their own meaning to it. When it comes to what I want people to take away, I really want paintings to exist in multiple ways. I'm a visual artist, so I really wanted to have the viewer participate in being viewed by the painting. So I wanted there to be this pattern of seeing and being seen. I wanted to talk about. I want to operate on a lot of different levels. We live in a post-colonial society now, and a lot of the things that we talk about are in line with that dialogue as we're trying to correct things that had happened in the past. Wanting to participate in that dialogue after doing my research at the university a couple years ago, that started to bleed into my practice. I also studied men's studies, and there's a lot of patterns in the history of men and the patriarchy, as it were. And I wanted to start to regard some of those things. When I started this painting, it was actually called The Hunter, because I started to think about the neighboring thing. This is actually a tree out inside of my house in Greenfield, Massachusetts. So it's my own neighborhood, snowy background, street, sidewalk. But I thought about men's role before, hunters, hunters gatherers are like home and who goes out to collect. So this is also camouflage. So when it comes to how pattern works into my work and what I want people to take away, I really want people to see themselves in the work, themselves in nature, and hopefully it behaves as some sort of mirror to the society that we're living in.
Thank you. Yeah, I love how you talk about like all the different kinds of social pattern, cultural pattern, historical patterns, gendered patterns. To me, that's really evocative. And when I hear you say all of that, I get kind of a visual of all of those types of patterns overlaid on one another, like kind of locking into their own similar patterning. And yeah, it's just, it feels really valuable to have this as part of the dialogue. And I also, so can, like, the eyeball is, who's the eyeball?
It's me. I work, if you look at my work, which I'm sure you have, I work a lot in self-portraiture. So when I got into grad school and it was a 3-year program, I started working with my body a bit, body as a source of context and original creation sort of stuff. And I was already doing self-portraiture. So what became really strange was I started painting myself out in videos. And eventually I started to see myself hiding myself and hiding myself in patterns. Like I would make digital videos of flower petals being blown around, and then I'd green screen those, and then I would make a video of myself painted out in green, and then you'd have this video of flower petals moving about. There's also a bit of erasure as the theme for that one, right? So I'm a gay man, I can't talk about it, I'm painting my mouth out, and hiding. So there's something in the representation, men studies, art history, men in art, the men being overrepresented in art, the man in this is barely being represented. You know what I mean? So there's something about visibility and invisibility in my own, in the process of making this and these other eyeballs facade paintings, as I call them to myself. That is me in them, but once I started to facade, I really wanted them to exist beyond me.
Yeah, totally. And also the pattern of your practice of figuring out ways to erase yourself or camouflage yourself, and doing that over and over is an interesting exploration of pattern too.
Yeah, it's a new process. I'm really glad that my history of digital video and some sort of manipulation photography and digital photography has all influenced my painting practice, because it's all just compositing.
Yeah. It's great. Thank you. I'm so glad we have an eyeball coming out of a tree. It's great.
Thank you. It loves to be there.
Okay, I think Kay is up next. Hi, Kate. Thank you for being here. Yeah, I really, 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 really love this piece. And one of the things that I was sharing with Kay was that the thing that really kind of drew me in was that I had no sense of, there were no gender signifiers to this figure, and I really liked that. It was a person in this really interesting sort of intricate, gentle, and also like very declarative backdrop, who I couldn't really read in any sort of gender particular way, and that felt very powerful and exciting. So definitely wanted that in the show.
Thank you. It's always so nice to hear when things come across to a viewer, because sometimes when we put our art out in the world, we're never really sure if it comes across how we hope. So I'm really grateful to hear that. I think to answer your questions, I'm a printmaker, and print and pattern sort of often go hand in hand in a lot of ways. And one way I've been thinking about is specifically that a print itself, because it's often part of an edition, is like a small piece of a pattern. So even though you don't maybe see the rest of the pattern, that would be the rest of the edition of the print, you're seeing sort of like a snapshot of it. And I think sort of everyone or several people, Ian and Kenneth and Sarah have all like now mentioned sort of identifying cultural patterns that that we're maybe trying to get out from under or break with. So I think as a genderqueer artist, I'm also thinking about things like compulsory heterosexuality as a pattern that is ready to be broken. And I think I bring that into my work because I am often making variable editions. So I work in printmaking, but this print, for example, is a piece in a variable edition. So each print in this edition is printed in different colors. And I think one thing that I would want people to know about my work is that DIY is really important to me. And that's also been, I think, an important element of the queer culture that I sort of came up in. And so although I am a printmaker, I often work outside of a traditional print shop. So this print is made using paper stencils instead of like a complicated photo emulsion that you'd need like an exposure unit for. So this is like 7 cutout stencils that are overlaid, and working that way allows me also to teach printmaking to people who like might not have ever been in a print shop or have an opportunity to go into one. So I think it's the DIY is an important part of my practice that that like enables me to share printmaking with people.
Yeah, thank you. That part feels really like resonant too, the DIY piece. And I love the fact that this was made with like the cutout pieces, as you were saying. That's kind of a COVID necessity part of the practice too, it sounded like.
Yeah, well, this piece actually I made before COVID, but I did submit it to the show because I felt like it sort of captured a feeling. I work a lot with like themes of queer domesticity, and I think this piece sort of captured a feeling I was having during the lockdown specifically, but like throughout the pandemic in general. So
Collapse.
oh, and actually that title is wrong. That was the title of a different piece I submitted.
Oh, I apologize.
No, that's totally fine. It is relevant, except that this piece was actually made before the pandemic. This piece is just called Bedroom. But there was another piece that I submitted called Queer Domesticity during the pandemic. And I do think it's relevant. So I would have named it that had I made it last year.
Yeah, totally. Can you say something about the green thing that is like a sort of traditional visual pattern?
Sure. Yeah, I'm really drawn to wallpapers, and this is actually based on a drawing that I made from a video still. I also work in video, and the pattern that is the green was actually on a wall, like it was a wallpaper on the white wall on the left there. So I sort of started with the pattern on that wall, and I kind of work, I don't know if like intuitively is the right word or something, but I work sort of haphazardly, might be a better word, while I'm printing often. So I had started the print with that print only being on that wall, and then I use the same screen to repeat that, take the pattern from the wallpaper and extend it to encompass the whole print. So just sort of thinking about bringing that pattern off the wall and into the room and over the figure. And
yeah, the over the figure part also really caught me. The like foreground, background, where are they? I love that. And that feels like perhaps a sociocultural commentary too, right? Like where is the placement of this figure? Like what are the patterns of how a figure like this is read and interacted with, and what is the legibility of a figure like this, and all of that kind of patterning too.
sure, yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Glad your piece is in the show. Okay, Jean Marie.
Yes.
You're up.
So I have to say that, I mean, I'm really proud and pleased to be part of the show. And when I found out you were curating it, I looked a bit at what you've done, and I thought this person is going to react to pattern in a way that's really complicated. complex, let's put it that way. And I think that everybody who's just talked about their work, it's really very interesting to me, the different ways one has gone about it. But anyway, to get to this work, which is called Blood, Sweat, Tears, this image is Braille with, oh no, again, this isn't Blood, Sweat, Tears. This is Come Home. I think that Blood, Sweat, Tears has 3 lines. So this one is called, this piece is Come Home. And the thing that about pattern particularly is that, I mean, I think that you, Sarah, had sort of touched on this in your opening remarks. It has to do with also repetition and the fact that something will come up again. I mean, it's made by constructing things that echo one another, for example, in everybody's work, but in my work, these particular dots, it's COME and HOME, and the OM is the same, right? It's part of a series of drawings I've done on vellum, and they're small, they're 9 by 12. Oh, the 14 by 12 is the frame size, but anyway, and I'll put a phrase, I'll draw a phrase in Braille, and then run my finger over it gently as if I were enacting the reading of it. And one of the things I'm very interested in language, and I'm really interested in illusionism as opposed to basically, well, it's a little long to get into this, but to work that's based on the text. I mean, just real briefly, like a medieval, like Annunciation is based on the text of the Bible. And then a Casat, Mother and Child, is based on actual experience on this earth, so to speak. But I'm about to go down an alley, so let me draw myself in. But one of the things I'm really interested in is how language both grants and denies access, and kind of the, you know, the recognition that one has one's own patterns, let's say, that we bring to every encounter, and the knowledge that it's, for all that I understand about the languages that I may know, when I'm using languages in a really broad sense, there's a lot that I can't know. And there's a poignancy to that. And I also think that I was also thinking after we spoke yesterday of the come home in terms of repetitions. I mean, you come home over and over again. You come home, you come home. Anyway, so that has to do with this series of work. I also have other work where I take Braille, I take discs and I paint them and paste them on fabric that's usually patterned, and I shape them on the wall and paint them, then light them and paint them as a still life. And I paint on burlap because what I'm trying to do is create a trompe l'oeil image of a fabric setup with discs so that you can feel and see their 3-dimensionality when actually it's flat. So that again is sort of part of this, the limitations of language. And there's a poignancy, for me at least, in that. I'd be curious to know what you felt, Sarah, when you saw it.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for what you shared. I mean, I had a lot of reactions to your piece when I saw it. I felt that somehow because of the smearing, I could kind of feel the texture of the vellum, and I really liked that. I also liked that the smear created a kind of dimensionality to me, where it seemed like the dots, it was more sculptural, like the dots were coming forward, and the smear almost felt like a suggestion or something left over from the dots that was recessing into the paper or the vellum, and I really responded to that. I learned Braille at one point, but only visually. So I couldn't differentiate with my fingers, but I could read it. I could read
Right.
the shapes. And so I think there's something about the memory of having this thing that I can no longer read that once was legible to me, but is very visually powerful, and like the visual patterning is powerful. Sort of all of that was present for me. And then just visually as an abstract piece, I think it's very powerful and beautiful, even if you don't know it's a language. Right? So I was very drawn to that as well. And just listening to you talk about your own inquiries around language and the granting of access and the denying of access,
Right.
it makes me think of the different patterns of like the coming home over and over and over. Sometimes a repetitive practice and a pattern of repetition creates a deeper relationship with a thing, and sometimes a pattern of repetition kind of renders that thing meaningless. Thinking about all of that and patterns in your work is, that's what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that it, I suppose it can empty out, but also since yesterday I was thinking about the idea of time in patterns, that somehow what you had spoken about yesterday suggests that to me. And I was also thinking about that in terms of almost a meditation when looking at, for example, Arabic art, which is patterns, and you can use language, right? There you can't use an image, but there'll be prayer niches with the Quran all over it, and then geometric patterns within that, and they sort of keep, and not so much this work or my work particularly, but something about patterns that almost by definition they regenerate, they keep going and going, and it's I suppose to think about it in terms of if you're following a pattern, you know what to expect, but you also have to let go of a certain amount of control because it's not yours. Anyway.
Well, that was like a profound note to.
And my apologies for the wrong title.
It's sorry. Yeah, at first I was ready to go with Blood, Sweat, Tears, which because I do have a picture, the same thing. It's okay.
So grateful to all of the artists for this conversation. And I'm curious if any of the artists have questions for each other, or if there's folks in the audience who have questions for any of the artists. Please, I think, are we doing the chat, Karen, for questions?
There is just one comment in the chat from Michelle Heinbrook to everyone. Amazing piece and process. And I believe that was put up during Kay Sarantino's piece.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I noticed that.
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
Is that possible?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would just like to ask Sarah about her process and her motivation of curating the show, and like I guess it's a well-rounded vision of what patterns are as a human activity instead of an aesthetic, formal aspect of the work. And I'd love to hear maybe a little bit more about her thinking about how she decided to put this group of artists together.
I
hope that's not.
Yeah, it's Michelle. So you're not lighting up for some reason.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, is it Michelle talking?
Yes, Sarah.
Yeah, you weren't lit up. I actually spoke a lot about that at the beginning of the call. I was really interested in kind of all of the different ways of exploring pattern, and not just what you would think of as kind of a visual repetition. So like patterns of feeling, patterns of thought, historical patterns. And I was really interested in work that kind of put together a visual pattern and a different concept of pattern. And yeah, it was very cool actually to explore a theme that has a variety of ways that it could be interpreted, and to figure out works that could speak to the whole range of the ways we can talk about that theme. So it was.
I liked it. Like it actually ties into your work a bit too. Like I can see your voice in it as an artist. So I feel like that was really strong. It was a cool project. Yeah. Totally. Thank you.
Yeah, if someone else has a question, feel free to unmute and ask away. For Sarah or one of the artists.
I'm curious to hear more from the artists, like how you relate to each other's work, or what I don't know, what is sparked for you in this conversation of patterns when you see the way other folks have approached it.
I have been completely blown away by everybody's, and it's really interesting that starting who's the first person who went? Wait a minute, I wrote it down.
Tina.
Yes, I mean, when seeing that, I mean, I kept feeling the sound of which now I understand was a heartbeat as an ouch. And it's similar to what you described, Sarah, that it was like, and my partner actually has serious cardiovascular disease. So that doesn't matter, but everybody and Ken, to go to the stairway, and it's interesting because it's so patterned, but spatially it doesn't make sense. It's like, at least I couldn't understand it in a way that you could actually navigate that space. And also obviously the eye and the craziness of that, and the beauty, Kay, of that figure. It's so what I love about a really well-drawn figure is that you feel the weight in it. And that figure, even though it was stylized to an extent, you could feel the weight on that couch. It's like, do you know June Leaf's work? She's works in a way very different from yours, but she's brilliant. She's like, I don't know, 90 almost already, and her figures, they're in the world in a way. It might be interesting to take a look at. Anyway, I just thought that everybody, it's inspiring to have heard everybody. And also the thing about pattern in any way being language. I mean, it's I suppose anything visual is a language that we're talking about, but it's like the augmentation of signs, you know, from the bruises from heart, you know, to the bark on that tree and beyond. It's like, because they accumulate. It's very beautiful.
I think what Kay said also, that it's interesting that a lot of us are trying to break patterns, is really because that's not something that is so overt in the work itself. You couldn't know that was what the intentions were. And I think that's pretty interesting to think about, the, you know, breaking gender identities or sexual identities or female male hierarchies or whatever it is. So I think, I don't know, Sarah, maybe that was in you also, and somehow that came through in the work that you selected.
Yeah, I appreciate you voicing the patterns piece, because I think that's definitely an important part of it.
Yeah, it was really interesting for me to hear more about the backgrounds of everybody as well through this conversation. And Ian, for example, that you're an architect, and it's really interesting because I myself look at the patterns within architecture as this sort of structure to create a lot of my earlier works. And I use, like, literally architecture and floor plans as a starting point in a lot of my work. And so that's why it was really interesting to hear how you in your everyday sort of work use these patterns and these structures, and then how that can then be transferred into your artistic. And then also it was interesting to me to see or to hear you talk about like the patterns that are left behind and kind of like what we leave behind. And I think so how you were talking about those artist studios, but then in mine, like a quilt is something that people pass on through generations and leave behind as well. So just kind of thinking about these sort of like legacies of patterns and pattern making as well, I thought was just kind of an interesting connection too.
Yeah, to kind of go off of what Ian had said too, I definitely had seen, especially after hearing everybody talk today, I started to see, not unlike the think that we make political art, because sometimes people, think that an artwork is political or isn't, or should be or shouldn't be. But I think what we're kind of hearing today is that it's so, I mean, I see it so much in our culture that maybe art could still be that sort of thing that is the catalyst for social change. At least I still hope that art can be that sort of thing. I sound like the romantic Californian that I am, but I got into all of this for some sort of like equality. And yeah, it's charming and delightful to hear that everybody, whether we're trying or not, are kind of having that occur in our work and through shows like this. So thank you all. And thanks again, Sarah, because it worked out in this way, you know what I mean? Intended or not, or subconsciously or not, is beautiful.
Yeah, I would say not totally unintended.
Yeah.
It's so nice to hear you all talk to each other too. It's like your work is all talking to each other, and now you are. That's very cool as well.
Yeah, it was interesting also to hear Kay talk about their process of the sort of starting with this film still, right, and then using printmaking then after that. So it made me think, I was like, oh wow, I was like, I could actually take this, traditional craft medium and then have it be this digital thing, but then have it be transferred back into another traditional medium of printmaking. And so I was like, oh, that could be so okay if you ever want to, collaborate at some point.
Yeah.
We'll be happy to do that. We can do it virtually.
Cool.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jeannie's sister. And Jeannie, I have a question for you. What is the reason you chose to have all the white space around the come home?
Well, it's to make the viewer come to it, and also to make it something that is of the scale of a finger, and it's also in a way I feel very humble doing this, because I'm entering a world that's not my own. So it's also so all of that is a lot of it's kind of a series of intimate factors. So that if it had been big, I mean, I make some big crazy paintings, but these particular drawings on vellum, they're all the same scale, and yeah, so that's the reason for it. So that you have to approach it, and I have to approach it like that too. It's kind of the mark making is like it doesn't take that long, but it takes everything in a way. It's sort of devotional now that I never talk to anybody, so but there are works that there's a series of them, and they all feel that way. But the Come Home, I have another piece. It's called Come Home, and it's stenciled. The words are stenciled, not in Braille this time, on a piece of wrapping paper that's roses, printed of roses, and I stenciled it in a way that I could still see the image below it. So it was like a thin acrylic blue over these pinkish orangish roses. And then I went in and I painted back into the stenciled acrylic to restore, to create transparency that wasn't there. And that's also come home. You know, it's like a going back. So that's just a little bit, not exactly the same.
Thanks. And I have one more question, I think for Ian. The color, you chose a grays, I'm sure for a reason. I wanted to hear you talk about the color of your pattern, of the spaces of women who are not known.
That's an interesting question. I don't think I chose it deliberately, but I use colored papers, or I use papers of a certain that are already a color. Maybe the gray is, maybe that's what's making me read it as melancholy. Maybe I should try something brighter, and I'll see what happens.
We're in the shadows too, so I was wondering.
I know. Who knows what would happen? I could try something really strong next time, like I don't know, orange or something.
Yeah, I was wondering what that might look like.
It's a good idea.
Of different colors of the same pattern.
It's a good idea.
Beautiful.
I'm gonna try it.
Unrecognized artists in magenta.
Like it.
Yeah, that's true. I was also thinking about how you created the grays in that. I mean, they're really beautiful and sort of subtle. So if you went to magenta, you might want to use like an orange ink or something. I'm just saying. Or you use a pencil? Is that an ink or pencil? I think it was ink, right?
It's ink, yeah. I'll try. I'll think about it. It is a good question, though.
Yeah, because then it would be like. And the drawings behind you are beautiful as well. Those are yours as well, yeah?
Those are mine as well, yes. Yes.
I'm curious, a question sort of for anyone, how you think about scale, since I think Jean just talked about it a little, but also particularly for Katina. I went to the gallery today because I actually live very close by, because I wanted to see the show again before we did our talk, and I got to see your piece in motion for the first time. And I'm curious, because in the confines of a gallery, I was viewing it small. I'm wondering what scale you imagine it, or what would be the preferred scale, so I can imagine it.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I think, me, as you guys know, we talked about yesterday, I don't live in New York. And so shipping and that kind of thing, there weren't really any sort of projectors or monitors available, unfortunately. But honestly, though, every time so far that I've shown this piece, it's never been projected large. Like, it's always been on actually, it's the first time I've done an iPad, but it's usually on a monitor, but only like a 24-inch monitor. So nothing that's huge. So it's actually meant to be this more intimate viewing experience and not projected huge. I mean, I think iPad's maybe a teeny bit too small, but like about a 24-inch monitor is usually what I show it on, because I wanted that, yeah, like I said, just that sort of like intimate experience, and not for it to be this like larger than life. And I think, as Sarah pointed out too, it might be a little bit too overwhelming, I think, if it was this huge sort of, ginormous projection. And I want it to be sort of that relationship between the actual like size on the body and, the size that you're viewing it as well.
That's really helpful. Yeah.
A really good question. Okay, sorry, but I was thinking, because of the idea that it's based on a quilt, when you asked that, I suddenly thought, I was then picturing it like a quilt size, right? Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, I think that could be interesting too, especially now that my wheels are spinning, but like if I create it in a physical form now too, right? I think that could be interesting for that to be at a sort of more quilt size. And then you could project even more on top of it anyways.
Well, I really think it's fascinating that somehow Sarah has selected these artists that have these connections that there was no way she could have known about just by looking at the work. And I also think it's very interesting that each of the artists chosen tonight has created pieces that embody contradictions, which is sometimes like a frustrating thing. And here, especially with hearing, the background and the insight into the work, it all feels very optimistic. And I think that's really beautiful. We're a bit over an hour, so I don't want to overtax people with this Zoom fatigue. And I want to just say how much I appreciate everybody's contributions tonight. Viewers, artists, curator, tech people. Thank you to everyone. And like I said, the show's up through the 31st. Then we're closed for August. And in September, the solo show here will be Amy Weil. So we're looking forward to that. So I encourage you to check that out. Yeah, you can see the work on the Artsy link and definitely contact the gallery if you'd like any more information. So thanks everyone for coming. Have a beautiful night.
Nice.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
all,
Good night.
everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
We don't want to go.
I know, me either. I'm staying. Yeah.
I know, it's really, really been great. I thank you so much, Sarah. It's really, really interesting. I
Yes,
mean, the show.
yes, thank you.
hello.
Thank you so much for all of that you shared. I really want to talk to you more about the, what did you say? Annunciation and like happening on the earth plane or something. I really want to, I might email you about a longer conversation.
Right, yeah, definitely. Definitely. It's been a bit of an obsession of mine. So yeah, let's be in touch.
Okay.
Okay,
So
and
what are you saying?
everybody.
This baby.
We're doing all right.
Oh, I just
Little baby.
I know, look at the little
Hi,
one.
babe. Look at your little squishy head.
Oh,
And they are
oh, it's her baby.
Oh, so sweet.
What a beautiful baby.
Really sweet.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye. I'm gonna call you Zoe. Very, very old friend. Thank you, everybody.